He found himself caring less and less whether the kidnappers lived or died. The thought that it might be at his own hands brought a sickening sense of relish. Another sign of the change. An expensive brandy snifter was set down before him. As they gave him time to drink, he again tried to convince his darker side that as satisfying as a moment's revenge might be, it could also seal his family's fate. Even the reptile, understood family. For now, it let him maintain control.
Finished with your drink? Good. Listen carefully. You're a veteran and a doctor. I respect that. So, to be clear, you're not here to do anything illegal, okay? You're here to save a life. Mine. Do that? Nobody gets hurt. Heck, I'll drop you all off anywhere you want. Home, Disneyland, whatever. Along with a big fat check to use for whatever weird alligator research you like, eh? That make you feel better?
Something glinted in the old man's eyes. The reptile found it familiar. Any words this man used, any promises he made, would always hold a distant second to fulfilling his own desires. Complex mammalian communities based on empathy and cooperation were alien to him. Connors could never trust Silvermane to let his family live, but he could trust him to keep them alive until he got what he wanted.
Yes.
Good. Marco, take him to Wesley in the lab.
But the creature was never completely gone. When the giant placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, it stirred.
I want to see my family first.
Marco grabbed Connors by the lapels. The giant's instincts were more recognizably primate in nature.
You do what Mr. Silvermane says when he says it.
The speed with which the previously motionless Silvermane rose impressed the reptilian part of Connor's mind.
Didn't you hear anything I just said about respect?
Silvermane slapped the giant until he released the doctor. Eyeing the floor in submission, Marco touched his reddened cheeks.
You got no reason to shame me like that, Mr. Silvermane.
Silvermane stepped back. His hands groped behind him, reaching for the desk.
No one gives orders except me. Don't ever...
Silvermane grasped at his chest. Meanwhile, Cicero looked like a gambler watching his horse pull into the lead. Noticing Connors was watching, he nodded toward his boss.
You got more reason to hope he makes it than I do.
Understanding, Connors rushed over, reaching for Silvermane's neck to take his carotid pulse. The mob boss slapped the hand away.
I'm fine, just a spell. It's passing.
Silvermane patted the worried Marco.
Easy, kid. We'll speak no more of this.
Cicero took Connor's elbow a second time and pulled him toward an open door. There was a hallway and stairs beyond.
The lab has a closed-circuit monitor. Every hour you work, you see your family for a minute.
Robbie Robertson circled his seated son, pausing occasionally to lean against the bookshelf, window frame, or wall of his office.
You want to be an activist? Great. I'll support you to the bitter end, but the world's stuffed with ignorance and education's the only solution. Quit school and you're a soldier unarmed.
I get what you're saying, but so many people of color put their trust in the system and get screwed. I don't see how I can fight it and let it indoctrinate me at the same time.
Indoctrinate? You make college sound like a POW camp. I fought injustice my whole life with my voice and my work. School didn't stop me. It helped.
How much of a voice do you really have when you're working for that?
Robertson! Where's Robertson?
Speak of the devil.
Don't worry, it's his first day back. He'll have to make it through a lot of congratulating employees before he gets here. Who knows? It might put him in a better mood. Or not. Welcome back, Jonah. I was just...
You! There you are, you quisling! You, Benedict Arnold!
The hospital rest had apparently done Jameson some good. He brandished the latest edition with the vigor of a much younger man.
The second my back is turned, you make a hero out of Spider-Man!
Simmer down, Jonah. I didn't make him anything. Those pictures tell the story. And we're supposed to report the truth, right?
Wrong! Who taught you journalism? It's about the angle, the editorial voice. You know how the Bugle feels about that web-slinging weasel. You know how I feel about him.
Randy watched intently as his father responded.
Jonah, it's your paper. You can write all the editorials you want on the editorial page, but news is my department. I call them as I see them.
You think I can't fire you for this? You think I won't?
You won't have to. If you want reality distorted to suit some paranoid vendetta, I'll quit.
Jameson's expression twitched from one extreme to another.
Wait.
Going into next
Hold
year,
on a minute.
I really want to try
Quit.
content.
What are you talking about, quit? Of course it's your news page. I don't know what's gotten into this place. Used to be a man could enjoy blowing his top once in a while. Fine, I accept your apology.
My what?
I'm too gentle, too sensitive for all this.
Once it was clear he wasn't immediately returning,
Does he really think you apologized?
Nah. But he'll never say so. The important thing is that the news this paper prints is as close to the truth as I can make it.
You stood up to him. You were really going to quit.
his father thought about it, then nodded.
I would have. But I also know the man well enough to realize it wouldn't come to that. Sure, he experiences things from a certain perspective, but check out his editorial on white privilege last month. Jameson's no racist, just a blowhard with a very weird grudge against Spider-Man. You want to be an effective force, you have to recognize who the real enemies are.
Okay, I get it. I'll stay at the issue if only so I can learn how to win an argument with someone like Jameson.
Son, that'll take you all the way through grad school.
Hanging around outside the window, Spider-Man shifted position before they could spot him.
Guess Randy's taking the patience lesson to heart. Wonder if I'll ever be able to do the same.
He made his way along the ledge until he had a view of the open workspace. A grumpy Jameson was surrounded by smiling staff. Whenever it looked like he might scream for everyone to get back to work, Betty Brandt and Ned Leeds threw more confetti on him. For a second, Peter thought he caught the publisher trying not to smile.
That man could start an argument in an empty house, but I am glad to see him. Still, a gander at Jameson's sour face isn't why I'm here. I never tangled with the Magia before, so I wasted the night looking for their headquarters. Heck, the only member I know by name is Silvermane. But there's nothing like getting the news in advance. Here's hoping it'll give me some ideas.
As the crowd focused on their beloved leader, Spider-Man slid open the window and snatched a printout of the latest edition. Suspended from a flagpole, he flipped through, pausing at a small piece slotted for page 2.
So, alleged Magia attorney Caesar, Big C Cicero, had Fisk's right-hand man released, huh? That's got to have something to do with the tablet. And look, they mention the fancy address of Cicero's law offices.
This time, once he counted the floors, finding the office was easy, especially when he spotted the attorney grabbing the same coat and hat he'd worn in the Bugle photo.
I'm in luck for a change. Another few seconds and I'd have missed him.
Cicero's back to him. Spider-Man couldn't resist flashing his spider signal on the wall. Cicero whirled. Despite the man's thick brow, his eyes grew large.
Spider-Man!
Peter hopped inside.
Glad you noticed so fast. I'm never sure when the batteries in this thing go dead. You must be the Big C. No offense, but I was wishing the Magia would be consistent about the nicknames. If the Big C's ironic, shouldn't it be Molehill Marco?
What do you want?
Spider-Man quickly closed the distance between them. The attorney looked ready to leap out of his coat and his skin.
Just a little conversation. All that web slinging can make a fellow lonely. How about answering a few questions? Like, why'd you have Wesley released?
That falls under client-attorney privilege.
Spider-Man moved forward. Cicero backed up, feeling his way along the bookcases.
Seriously, do I look like a court of law? But, okay, how about you tell me about how the tablet fits in? Or better yet, where the Magia HQ is at?
If I did know, you think I'd be stupid enough to betray the Magia?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Peter looked down. Cicero's finger was on a button hidden beneath one of the shelves. Knowing his spider sense would have warned him if the threat was imminent, he lifted the attorney off the ground by his fur lapels.
Ah!
Why'd you have to go and do that? Now you have to tell me what I want to know even faster.
I told you I'm not blabbing!
Letting go of the attorney, Peter turned just as a panel on the opposite wall slid open. It revealed a hidden passage, along with the silhouettes of the armed men inside it.
Take cover, Big C. We got enough muscle to nail him.
Cicero dove, giving them a clearer shot.
Talk is cheap! Do it!
Spider-Man was bounding off the wall and headed for the attackers.
What's he even doing here?
Who cares? We could be the guys who whacked Spider-Man.
Fingertips securing him to the plasterboard, Spider-Man kicked one advancing mobster into the other. Before he could take out the trio at the door, they split up. Landing in front of the nearest mobster, Spider-Man balled up his fist.
How do you know we're keeping that Connors dame and her brat here?
Spider-Man stopped mid-blow.
Wait, what? You have Doc Connor's family here?
Idiot! He didn't know until you told him!
Desperate to make up for his mistake, the thug fired haphazardly, spraying the room with bullets. Spider-Man snagged a heavy law book with his webbing and used it to knock the gun away. Spider-Man leapt as a heavy chair cracked the wall beside him. Wrapping his legs around the neck of the bruiser who'd thrown it, Spidey twisted and took him down.
Pay attention, boys. I think they call that a standing head scissor.
More mob soldiers entered from the passageway, filling the office. Cicero climbed out from under his desk and used them as cover. Holding his fur-lined hat to his head, he sprinted into the secret corridor. A web took down 3 more gunmen, but by then the hidden panel was closing. Twirling sideways through the air, Spider-Man body-blocked 2 men, then grabbed another's shooting arm and threw him at the group still on their feet. That bought him enough time to tear open the fake wall and leap into the narrow space beyond. At the base of a long staircase, a steel door was descending from the ceiling to seal the path. Spider-Man dove down the stairs and managed to get his fingers under the lip. His strength was barely enough to keep the heavy metal from breaking his bones.
Another fine bit of advice from Uncle Ben. Lift with your knees.
Squatting, Spider-Man held onto the door and straightened his legs. Beyond the now broken door, there were more stairs leading down. Lots of them, with landings every 15 feet. Remembering how high the office was, Peter guessed there were 30 stories worth. For speed, he took to the wall. His flexible joints allowed him to pull with his clinging hands, push his legs ahead beneath his chest, then pull again, this time with his feet, propelling him faster and faster downward. A fleeting shadow ahead told him he was catching up to Cicero.
Help! Help us, please!
Mrs. Connors!
Had Cicero let them go to ensure his own escape? Pivoting back, Spider-Man spotted the digital recorder on the previous landing and realized the trick. The delay had cost seconds, but that was more than enough to change the course of lives. He dropped down from the final landing, where the stairs ended in a small hallway. Not wanting to repeat his mistake with the kingpin, he tugged a spider tracer from his belt. Barreling along, he reached a small private garage just as a dark sedan headed for the street. Still running, he hurled the tracer. Before he could see whether it reached his target, his spider sense flared, but there was no place to go. Peter was sure his shoulder was dislocated. A few ribs cracked. Having narrowly missed being buried, he pushed through the wreckage into a smoky hollow. As far as he could tell, no one else had been caught in the blast. All that was left of the private garage was a smoldering crater. Wounded, his entire nervous system screaming, he barely noticed the soft tingling beneath the pain, telling him something else had survived the explosion. 10 feet away, on a bit of undamaged concrete, the small red light on his spider tracer blinked.
Yep, lost him.
When Peter Parker awoke, the totality of his heart and mind was consumed by one thing: pain.
Am I strong? Sure. Fast? Better believe it. Drop a half a ton of concrete on me, though, and I'm definitely going to hurt in the morning. It is morning, isn't it?
Sunlight seeped around the edges of the closed shade, confirming it was daytime, but for all he knew, it could be afternoon already. He had a vague half-memory of Harry saying goodbye on his way out, but that might have been hours ago. At least he could move, if not quite stand. His joints were stiff as a board. After half an hour, he was able to hobble like an old man into the shower and then out the door. At least he was on his feet. Doc Connors and his family were out there somewhere. There wasn't a lot Peter could do about it in his current condition, even if he knew where they were. He was getting better, though, not worse. He looked at the clock. 9:17 a.m. Maybe by nightfall? Meanwhile, since Captain Stacy had told him about the kidnappings, he could be sure the police were on the lookout for the Connors family.
May as well limp over to a class or two. I just hope the professors don't call on me. If they even remember who I am.
As he shuffled across the plaza, he kept his head down, his shoulders scrunched. Josh and Randy were hanging with friends on the steps of the Physical Sciences building. He pretended he didn't see them, earning a dismissive glare from Kittling.
What? You too good for us?
Easy, Josh. Just because you say jump doesn't mean everyone has to ask how high.
Whoa, what did the newbie eat for breakfast? Sticking up for a friend, huh? Good for you.
Hi, guys.
Peter kept his eyes focused on the stairs. He was about halfway up when a pair of familiar sneakers stopped in front of him.
Gwen?
I told you I was...
Cocking her leg to put one foot on a higher step, she started talking, but Peter's enfeebled mind was racing too fast for him to pay attention. He felt like the proverbial deer in the headlights.
When was the last time I saw her? No, when was the last time I saw her as Peter Parker? Have I even texted her since she told me about the attack on her dad? It's hard keeping track when I'm healthy. What if I muddle things? Repeat something I heard when I was eavesdropping as Spider-Man?
Peter, did you hear a word I said?
Sheesh. No, I didn't. Did she just break up with me? Did she want to go to a movie? Did she say she was engaged to someone else? Gwen, please. I'm so sorry. I am totally exhausted. I shouldn't even really be out.
She was clearly still annoyed, but she reached out to steady him.
Our relationship. She wants to talk about our relationship. That must be it, right? I know we need to talk. Can we do it a little later when my last class gets out at 4?
I can't. I'll be busy.
Busy?
If you must know, I'm running an errand for my father.
Sorry, I didn't mean... Is tomorrow okay? Pick a time.
Lunch.
He was relieved when she walked off, but also a little hurt.
Something's really bothering her.
He limped onward, hoping to make it to the back row of the lecture hall without further incident. Then Harry came running up.
Roommate! I was hoping to see you.
Hi, Harry.
Hi, Harry? That's the best you've got for a friend sporting a new mustache?
Is that new?
It was an honest question. Judging from Harry's reaction, however, this was not the time for honesty.
Now I know how MJ feels if I don't notice when she gets her hair done.
He walked off in a huff. Peter looked around, wondering whether there was anyone left he hadn't offended yet, or for that matter, whether there was anyone else he knew. He didn't even realize he was blocking the way in until someone shouldered by.
Oh, man. Did my parents accidentally offend an evil sorcerer or something?
Wesley admired how quickly and completely the Magia had set up the half-lab, half-library, until it occurred to him they'd probably followed his own notes after hacking his computer. In any event, the new state-of-the-art 3D imaging yielded immediate results. All known forms of writing were two-dimensional, but as the experts had already discovered, the meaning of the tablet's symbols changed based on regular variations in their carved depth. On the other hand, while those experts had guessed that the table contained some type of instructions, they'd focused on distinguishing a recipe from the rest of the prose by searching for symbols based on natural ingredients, herbs, and so on. Wesley reasoned that the carvers had been far more sophisticated, and the symbols they should be searching for were closer to chemical notation. Sodium and chlorine as opposed to salt, a formula as opposed to a recipe. In that case, a biochemist might have an easier time making the distinction, hence the presence of Dr. Connors. Indeed, they'd already become the first people to sort a formula from the surrounding prose. Unfortunately, that wasn't the same as understanding the formula. Since that initial breakthrough, they'd run into a dozen dead ends. Wesley was so fascinated, he tended to forget the Magia's threats. Not Connors. The fate of the man's family weighed so heavily, it acted only as a distraction. Was it Samuel Johnson who said that when a man knows he is to be hanged, it concentrates the mind wonderfully? Well, he was wrong about Wesley's unwilling partner, at least. To relax, Wesley had taken to flipping a coin and catching it, something he'd seen George Sanders do in an old movie. Connors, though, kept clenching his fists and throwing a stylus against the wall.
You do realize we've made more progress in the last few hours than others have made in centuries.
Yes, but it's not enough, is it? I couldn't run any tests, so I only have his appearance and that attack to go by. But if his heart's as frail as I suspect, it could kill him any minute. Even if Silvermane means to keep his word, which I doubt, he could die long before we finish.
The information left Wesley feeling torn. Silvermane's death would leave the Magia in disarray, at least temporarily. On the one hand, it could be just the opportunity Mr. Fisk needed. On the other, it could rob Wesley of both his life and the chance to solve the great mystery. Connors picked up the stylus and used it to rotate the wall-projected images of the chemical symbols they'd discovered.
Even now that we're just looking at the formula, there are still too many variables. Some could be components, some proportions, some the relationships between ingredients.
Connors watched the coin twirl. Eyes wide, the biochemist looked back at the projection. A hooked bar on a symbol marked it as part of the formula, but each symbol also contained a curve in various positions. Connors went from one symbol to the next, tracing the different curves: straight, slanted, and horizontal. Wesley realized what Connors was thinking before the man spoke.
The curves appear in all the symbols, prose or chemical, in about 20 variations. In the formula, though, there are only 3, so they could relate to our variables: ingredient, amount, and relationship. No one noticed before because they were never looking only at the formula. I think we've got it.
When Cicero and his hostages finally reached the Galby building, he planned to secure them and take a few minutes for himself. The long night hadn't even allowed for a bathroom break, but the instant Silvermane learned they were there, he demanded they all be brought straight to his office. Like a good soldier, Cicero obeyed. As he stepped out of the crowded elevator, his men shoved a hooded, cuffed mother and child along behind him. Silvermane put his gnarled fists to the desk, pushed himself to standing, and walked over to stare down at Cicero.
What do you mean by bringing them to our headquarters without informing me?
Cicero knew that Silvermane was towering over him for show, to accentuate their difference in height, and to demonstrate that pack animal superiority. But Cicero was tired and stressed. What should have sounded like a plea came out more like a command.
Take it easy!
Recognizing his mistake, he toned himself down.
Mr. Manfred, Spider-Man showed up at my office. I had to make a judgment call.
The excuse only made things worse.
Spider-Man? He won't stop until he finds them. You've just brought him to our doorstep.
First off, I couldn't call. This is not the kind of thing we could discuss over the phone. Second, last I saw him, the wall crawler was buried under rubble. Any luck, he's dead. At worst, he's hurting pretty bad. Third, I just spent the entire night and half the morning driving around Jersey and Connecticut to make sure no one tailed us. I don't see what else I could have done.
At some point, Silvermane had stopped listening.
You stink.
Sorry, but they ain't got showers in the sedan.
The silence that followed was so complete, Cicero could almost hear Silvermane's lips twitch as they curved into a thin smile.
If I needed an excuse to gut your treacherous hide, you just gave it to me. Marco, take this miserable...
But the Man-Mountain had a hand to his earpiece.
Mr. Silvermane, it's the lab. They've made some kind of progress.
When Silvermane's mouth dropped open, Marco flinched.
Sorry, you said I should tell you first thing no matter what you were doing. You said I should interrupt.
No, Marco, I'm not angry. I'm thrilled.
Shaky on his feet, Silvermane waved the giant over to use him as a support.
We must go there at once.
On the way out, Silvermane paused to glare at Cicero. Between the wildly confident look in the mob boss's eyes and his wide, skull-like grin, Cicero briefly worried that the rock really did hold some weird, powerful secret. Once they were out of sight, Cicero pushed the thought away.
He's delusional.
Martha Connor's reaction reminded him that someone in the Maggia should act sane. He turned to his men, who were still hanging back near the private elevator, and gestured at the hostages.
Find some room to keep them in. Do I have to check with the boss on that too? They're here, okay? We have to keep them somewhere. Do it!
At first, Connors thought the lights in the hall outside the lab had gone out. But it was Marco, his large form, blocking the doorway. The giant eyed them warily, but stayed mute as he helped Silvermane into the room. The Maggia leader looked even closer to death than when Connors had last seen him. At the same time, his gray face had a strange new shine. A look of, for lack of a more age-appropriate term, childish eagerness.
Do you have it?
Connors hoped Wesley would answer, but the man had quietly shifted to the rear of the lab. Did he trust Connors as a doctor to better explain the danger? Or was he avoiding Silvermane's attention at all costs?
We've isolated a formula for some sort of elixir, but we have no idea what its intended purpose is, let alone whether it would work. The next stage would be to start some tests. Then in a few weeks...
What's the tablet say about it?
With a slight pang of guilt, Connors nodded at his partner. By now, they'd both guessed the reason for the aged mobster's interest in the elixir.
The prose is not my area of expertise. Wesley?
Before answering him, Wesley cast him an admiring glance, as if to say, touché.
We haven't had time to complete even a rough translation of the full text, but an accurate answer would require years of research. Aside from the variations in meaning, which are problematic in any translation, there seems to be an entire cosmology buried in the layers of the writing. Literally.
Blah, blah, blah. Just tell me if it says something like this.
He tilted his head back and closed his eyes, as if entering some sort of trance.
They tell us that we're born to die, but there's no sense in that, say I. Those of us who know the truth will drink the nectar of youth.
Finished, his impatient essence returned from wherever it had gone. Confused, Wesley looked at Connors.
Is it anything like that? Either of you? Is it?
Mr. Silvermane asked a question.
Yes and no. There are some similarities, but...
Ha! Get to work! Create that nectar for me now!
I can't. I have no idea what these chemicals will do to your body. If it kills you, my family dies. Am I wrong?
The hard part's done. I could hire any one of 1,000 chemists to follow a formula, but I'm in a hurry, so I'll make your decision easier. Either you create that nectar immediately, or they die now, starting with your son. And to be clear, you'd better hope it works.
As Marco helped his boss to the door, Connors felt the creature stirring in the back of his mind.
Silvermane!
The old man turned back. Connors pointed at Wesley. The thing inside him didn't trust partners, or anyone else for that matter.
I have a family at stake. He doesn't. I don't want him here.
Silvermane's eyes slid back and forth between the two, then settled on Connors.
Okay,
When the class was over, the rush of jostling elbows and shoulders reminded Peter how much his body still ached. The worst of the pain had subsided enough for him to plod along the jam-packed hall without looking severely disabled. But outside, a late afternoon chill managed to invade the stiffness remaining in his limbs, even through his clothes. Web-slinging was still out of the question. A limbering walk helped, but it was clear from the sharpness in his chest that he had one or two cracked ribs. Fortunately, they only hurt when he stretched a certain way or inhaled too deeply. He was thinking of heading to a clinic to have his side bandaged, but the sight of the coffee bean conjured more emotional concerns.
Just as well Gwen's busy today. I'm not up for a serious conversation.
As he passed the window, the sight of a cozy couple at one of the tables made him sigh.
I still feel like a jerk for the way I blew up at Flash. Did I ever apologize for that?
The waitress was obscuring his view, but he caught a glimpse of platinum blonde hair. Thinking it was a trick of the light, he almost kept walking. But something made him stop and draw closer to the glass.
Wait a minute.
The waitress still concealed their faces, but not the male's crisp dress uniform.
Flash? With Gwen? It isn't possible.
He pressed closer.
It just isn't!
When the woman lifted her head to thank the waitress, Peter couldn't deny it any longer. It was Gwen. She and Flash were alone together, leaning across a small table to look into each other's eyes. He couldn't make out what they were saying, but what did it matter? She'd lied to him. He turned away and stormed along the sidewalk, not caring where he was going.
So that's how it is, huh?
Time passed. The sounds and sights of the city faded. The bustle of the streets, the passing cars.
I was an idiot to think a girl like Gwen could ever...
The cement at his feet was a blur. He didn't even notice as it darkened with the fading day.
But I thought... she and I...
He hit something, or something hit him. It didn't matter. It gave easily enough.
Watch where you're going, runt.
The words felt so far off. They might as well have come from a stereo or TV playing somewhere inside one of the apartments above.
I wouldn't have believed it in a million years.
He ain't listening. Maybe he needs to have his ears cleaned out.
When the two bruisers came up from behind, Peter's spider sense tingled, but barely. He swatted at them with the back of his left arm.
Get out of my way!
The wounded men, barely conscious, helped each other to their feet and ran.
No! Didn't JJJ teach me that lesson? If I'd hit him any harder, I'd...
It had all happened so fast. He doubted his attackers would remember much, let alone admit how easily they'd been tossed. Had anyone else seen? Where was he, anyway? He looked around. Somehow, he'd managed to wander onto a dark sidewalk on the Lower East Side. The street was one of the few still abandoned to crack dealers.
It's almost as if I was asking for trouble. No wonder Gwen prefers Flash over a nut job like me.
Understanding didn't make it hurt any less. And when he saw the number on the caller ID, the betrayal felt as fresh as when he'd first seen it, hours ago.
Yeah?
Peter? It's Gwen.
I know.
Okay. You were in pretty bad shape this morning. I wanted to see if you were feeling any better.
Well, I'm not.
That's it? If something's bugging you, I've got a right to know what it is.
Sure, Gwen. You've got your rights. I hope you enjoy sharing them with Flash Thompson, because it won't be at my expense anymore.
After spending some time with his head in his hands, he eyed the street and decided that whatever aches his body still had, it was time for some action. Spider-Man hurtled between buildings, cracked ribs and all. Pushing the range of his web line to its limit, he rose to the heavens, plunged back toward the earth, and then careened higher still. Yes, he feared for the Connors family, but whenever his hurt body threatened to fail him, it was the image of Gwen and Flash that pushed him onward. Did it matter what gave him the energy? His uncle would have said it did, but indulging anger could only cloud his judgment, get in the way at the wrong time. But Peter couldn't help what he was feeling, This wasn't the time for a mental health day. If he vented enough, he hoped the pain would wear out faster and clear his mind.
Who am I kidding? Can't I even remember the last time my mind felt clear? Wait, yes I can. It was when I got that check from Robbie. Wow, how long did it take for me to screw things up by attacking Flash? Half a day? Or was Gwen already seeing him?
It was Friday night. He might be heartbroken, but all sorts of New Yorkers were out celebrating. And some of them would be looking for more than a smoothie. With the police in 3 states focused on the kingpin, the odds were that any drug runners or distributors still operating on the streets would be Maggia. All he had to do was find one and break them. It really felt like breaking something. As he hunted for an informer, a few false alarms led him to interrupt some private but perfectly legal conversations. An hour later, a top-down Porsche packed with upper-crust teens looked like a better bet. The driver, oblivious to Spider-Man's presence above and behind them, had turned down a quiet street and tried to hush his rowdy friends. They pulled up in front of a dingy walk-up and flashed their headlights. As the web-slinger watched from a fire escape, a scraggly figure on the stoop flicked a cigarette lighter in response.
I bet he's not selling exam answers.
A smaller figure scrabbled out from the trash at the man's feet. A boy, his raggedy clothes too thin for the weather. When the driver handed the kid a roll of bills, Spider-Man landed on the hood of the Porsche.
Don't you have homework or something?
One of the teens held up a phone.
What the? You think we're gonna pose for a selfie? Do I have to explain?
The driver understood better than his friends.
Sorry, sir.
Spider-Man leapt up, letting the Porsche pull out beneath him. The boy with the roll of bills was halfway down the block, but Peter wasn't interested in catching him. Zipping along the grime-slick building bricks, he grabbed the fleeing dealer by the nape of his jacket and dangled him in the air. Favoring his hurt ribs, Spider-Man turned his catch around, bringing them nose to nose. The dealer was roughly Peter's age, his jacket and clothes far warmer than the boy's.
You use children to peddle your poison? What was that kid, 8?
He's hiding from social services while his mom's in rehab. If you think about it, I'm doing him a favor. It's not like I adopted him.
You miserable!
Holding on tight, Spider-Man crept backwards up the wall, towing his captive along with him. As the ground receded, the crook kept looking down. Whenever he turned away or closed his eyes, Spider-Man nodded at the ground so he'd look again. 4 stories, 5, 6. At 7, Peter asked,
Where's Maggia headquarters?
No way. Whip me up for the cops to find. I'll be out in a week.
Spider-Man shook him, just enough to make the seams in his jacket start to tear.
I'm not falling for it. You're no Punisher. You're the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Peter shook him a little more. This time, the tearing lowered his body a few inches.
Not when I'm dealing with murderous scum!
The man squirmed, making his jacket rip all the more. In seconds, he was dangling by threads.
Fine! It's the Galvey building, right across town. You tell anyone it was me, I'm worse than dead!
What do I care? I didn't adopt you.
Peter gave him a little shove. Just enough to drop him into a trash bin, thick with kitchen garbage.
Frickin' bully! You don't know how good you got it with that mask covering your face!
Hey! You and I are not the same. You're the bad guy.
Spider-Man webbed up the thug and left him for the police to find. Gagged, the dealer couldn't speak, but the terror in his eyes made Peter pause.
Okay, yes, I'm being a bully, sort of. And sure, maybe I enjoyed it a little, but only because this guy deserves it, right? Why not let the lowlife spend some time looking over his shoulder for a hitman? Don't worry, I'm not in the habit of giving up anyone to crooks, even if they are other crooks. Besides, I couldn't if I wanted to. I don't know who you are either.
The Kingpin had assured Vanessa that the beach house was safe. It was bought and maintained by a holding company, so it couldn't possibly be traced back to them. The security system was the best money could buy. The men outside, his most trusted. But every night when he lay in their huge bed, he seemed gripped by the same nightmare. Though the bruises from his battle with Spider-Man had healed, the scars clearly remained. His expressions alternated between terror and rage, his arms and legs flailing hard and fast. At those times, Vanessa had to scramble to get out of his way for her own safety. Usually she woke him and tried to calm him. Tonight, though, she let him thrash about, hoping she might come to some decision about him, about them. He had lied to her about Richard, torn open her heart, severed the bond of their trust. She watched him breathe, thinking idly of what might happen if his breathing stopped. The very idea made her hate herself. He'd lost Richard too, and when he said he was trying to protect her, she believed him. Still, she couldn't help wondering what other horrid truths he might be protecting her from. She slipped on a robe and stepped out onto the bedroom balcony, as much to escape his pained moans as to watch the ocean. The sky was clear, the night almost warm. Having been kept up every night by Wilson's kicks and flails, her nerves were frayed. The experience, though, had accustomed her to sudden surprises. So when she saw the figure standing in the shadows a few yards away, staring at her, she barely gasped at all. She wanted to scream, to let Wilson know his nightmares were real, but something held her back, and she let herself be led away, where her husband could not hear.
Come here.
For hours, Silvio Manfredi watched his captured chemist work. He needed a nap, but feared something more than sleep was waiting, that if he closed his eyes for an instant, he'd never open them again. His failing body felt distant, as if he weren't crumpled in the extra chair Marco had brought to the lab. Instead, he felt halfway around the world, in a place he'd never been, sitting cross-legged on a rocky throne. Below, along a green slope, younger male primates picked their teeth with blades of grass, waiting for him to die. Dr. Connors faced him, a beaker in hand. The liquid in it was so clear it looked like water, except for the sparkling silvery mist hovering over its surface, like steam over a warm bath. Or was his eyesight failing too? He reached for it, but it was farther than he thought.
Bring it closer. Give it to me.
It could kill you.
So? You're a doctor. You must have figured out by now that I'm dead anyway.
Mr. Silvermane, don't. We don't know what those chemicals are. What if it's a trick? What if he poisoned you?
No, Marco. I might have expected that from Wesley, but Dr. Connors has his family at stake. We can trust his fear for them.
The beaker was still out of reach. Silvermane forced himself to his feet. He wrapped his fingers around the glass and tugged, but the doctor did not let go.
Don't test me. To get what I want, I'd eat my own children.
I believe you.
Connors relinquished his grip. Silvermane tilted his head and downed the nectar. It went down like tepid water. Silvio thought he saw that diamond fog emerge from his mouth like vapor in winter. There was a wet sensation at the base of his gut, the same feeling he always had when he was parched and took a drink. But the feeling didn't stop in his stomach. It kept going down, all the way to his feet, then back up into his head. And Freddy felt himself straighten, as if he were growing taller. Then, all of a sudden, he was outside his body, floating in the lab, watching his hands grasp the sides of his head. He didn't feel any pain, but he heard himself scream, saw himself fall.
You killed him! You thought it would save you, didn't you?
Don't push me. You don't know what you're dealing with.
Then they were gone. Silvio Manfredi was back on that verdant slope. Every male gorilla below him lifted its head, each thinking its time had arrived at last. But it hadn't. Not yet. The man-mountain turned on a pale and rattled Kurt Connors.
You killed him! You killed the boss! And now you're gonna die!
Connors lurched back and tripped. Before he could hit the ground, Marco caught his lab coat and held him. Suspended above the tiled floor, Connors thrashed.
Let go of me! While you still can!
Not understanding or caring what he meant, Marco pulled back, ready to smash the scientist's head into the tiles.
Stop!
As if responding to a Pavlovian bell, Marco obeyed instantly.
Mr. Silvermane?
A 50-year-old man stood in the center of the lab. He was wearing the same tailored clothes as the boss, but his hair wasn't white. It was gray, and his wrinkles had nearly disappeared.
It's some kind of trick. You can't be him.
Look at me, Marco. Study my face. It's the same, only younger. Listen to me, isn't this the voice of your master? This is the tablet's secret. Eternal youth. With it, I'll run the door.
You tell...
The man in Silvio Manfredi's clothes stretched his arms, his muscles pressing against the fabric of his shirt.
60 years? Ha! With that nectar, I'll be around forever!
Connor scrambled to his feet and brushed past a freshly showered and dressed Caesar Cicero, who had been drawn by the screaming, thinking and hoping the old man was dead or dying.
What the?
Someone who could have been Silvermane's kid was in the science geek paradise, wearing Silvio's outfit.
Come in, Caesar. Been waiting for you. Just like you've been waiting for me to die.
Poser or not, the man's eyes burned with Manfredi's predatory sheen.
He got younger, Big C, on account of the tablet.
Despite the shock, Cicero's mind went to work, calculating his best move.
Okay, so I don't know for sure what the hell happened here, but bottom line, do I care? If that is Silvermane, he's gonna kill me. If it's not, Marco should be killing him. Get them to turn on each other, and I kill two birds without even throwing a stone. Marco, you stupid lug, it's a trick. That can't be Silvermane. He must be a plant in league with the cops. They're trying to trap us, make us tip our hand.
Well, that's what I thought, but he said...
And you believed him? It's not like he's gonna confess. Get him before it's too late!
Marco's brow twisted so hard, it hurt just to see. He'd have to decide one way or another fast, if only to ease the tension. And he did.
Don't worry, Big C. I'll take care of him.
But the fist didn't connect. Instead of ducking, whoever it was pushed past Man Mountain's long arms and clocked Marco in the jaw.
You brainless mongrel! I beat my way to the top of the Maggia decades before you were born! You think you're gonna stop me now?
The arrogant self-aggrandizing was so familiar, it made Cicero's eye twitch. Maybe this was Silvermane. Silvermane on steroids. Marco tried the same move again, only to walk his jaw into another blow.
Ha! You're a good dog, Marco, but you don't know many tricks.
The way you use your fists, it's like the stories they used to tell.
Marco went limp, letting his attacker grab his head and lift it so they were face to face.
Speak! Tell me you know who I am!
Yeah, it's gotta be you. Only younger. I see it in your eyes. It was that stuff you drank, and it's still doing it. Your hair, it ain't gray no more. You look younger than me.
It was true. The salt and pepper was gone, leaving a lustrous brown. As Cicero watched, Silvermane's hair thickened and more wrinkles vanished. His muscles grew lithe, losing some of their bulk, the shirt and jacket loosening around him. Silvermane, and yes, somehow it was Silvermane, changed from a man in his 50s to one in his 40s. Spider-Man didn't have to check the address. Even from blocks away, the 14-story Galby building, with its tan brick facade and clock tower top, Looked as if it had materialized right out of the Roaring Twenties, back in the days of the mob.
And those tall, narrow windows? Bless them. Make it easy to see inside.
He'd planned to start at the top and work his way down, but along the way, a fancy lab behind some frosted glass caught his eye, mostly because of the two figures within.
The extra-large Frankenstein type looks like a man-mountain to me. As far as the other one, the Bugle photo was black and white, but I'll be damned if he doesn't look like Silvermane.
As soon as he landed between them, his bruised body reminded him how unhappy it was.
Ow! Gotta make this fast. Focus on what's important, even if it means leaving the tablet behind for now.
All right, kiddies. I'm here for Dr. Connors and his family, so if you'll just tell me where...
He blinked at his first clear view of the man he'd thought was Silvermane.
Wait, whoa! What?
Time to prove your loyalty, Marco. Sick him!
I was hoping you'd ask, Mr. Silvermane.
The aptly nicknamed Man Mountain stomped toward the hero. Spider-Man was waiting.
Silvermane? He looks Crypt Keeper old in the photos. Do cameras really age you that much?
Marco looked stronger than the Kingpin, but he wasn't nearly as fast. A simple straddle jump took Peter out of reach, with time to spare.
Guess what they say about big ships turning slowly is true. Broken ribs or not, this part should be easy.
Taking to the ceiling, Spider-Man grabbed Marco's wide collar and pulled him into the air.
This is making my bruises hurt like hell, but no reason to tell him that.
Spider-Man let go. Long before Marco could recover, Spider-Man was on him, fist raised for a knockout blow.
I'm still getting younger, more powerful. I feel like I'm in my 20s.
Spider-Man had to look twice before realizing it was the same man. His clothes were looser, his face that of someone in his prime. Obvious as the conclusion might be, it wasn't easy to accept.
That's Silvermane?
It was the drink they made from that tablet.
Spider-Man's fist was still poised for the punch. Marco's large body went limp.
Thanks.
Silvermane tossed off his jacket and loosened his tie, as if he were getting ready for a street brawl.
Not even you can oppose me now.
If you say so, Peter Pan. But as much as I'd like to oppose you, I've got places to be. Hostages to rescue.
Spider-Man bounded for the door.
If you want to wait a bit, I'll be happy to come back and oppose you in a few.
A beaker smashed into the spot where Spider-Man would have landed. Splashing acid bubbled through the paint and seared his costume, burning bits of skin on his already pained back. Writhing, he dropped to the floor. The Magia leader rolled up his sleeves.
I'm gonna make an example of you. Once word hits the streets that I beat Spider-Man, all of New York will fall in line.
Is it the pain, or is his voice getting higher, younger? Ow! Okay, sure, he's pretty strong, but he's still human. Once I shake off this excruciating pain, I can...
Silvermane slammed both fists into Spider-Man's broken ribs. Peter felt the hard knuckles press the bones inward toward his lungs, then thought he heard the ribs crack again as Silvermane withdrew. No longer quite so confident, Spider-Man rolled sideways, protecting his ribs. The young man Frady stepped forward and kicked the burns on Peter's back.
I've got decades of experience, 1,000 brawls to draw on, and I always bring guns to a knife fight.
Dizzy, finding it hard to move or think, Spider-Man folded into a fetal ball. Silvermane knelt at his back.
What are you? Just some smart-ass kid, some freak.
Spider-Man tried to rally, but one look into Manfredi's eyes, brimming over with sadistic pleasure, and he froze. The driving rage Peter had carried since seeing Gwen with Thompson fled, taking its heated energy along with it. All that remained was an old, overwhelming sense of helplessness. He'd been through this many times before, tussling in schoolyards, being attacked by Jameson, combating supervillains far stronger than Manfredi, and sometimes it seemed fighting the whole of the world. It had all hurt, inside and out. Then he realized It had also never stopped him.
And I'm not some pitiful school kid anymore.
Why don't you give up and die?
Opening his eyes, Peter saw that the Magia chief looked like a teenager now. Though fit, his muscles weren't as fully developed as they'd been even a few minutes ago. He'd reached a point where his youth left him weaker, not stronger. More than that, his punches were no longer focused on Spider-Man's wounds.
He's frustrated. The younger he gets, the more impatient he is too.
When the time was right, Spider-Man straightened and slammed his shoulders into Silvermane. Manfredi flew back. The mobster lay on his back, eyes open, motionless save for a slight shivering in his limbs. He looked even younger now. So much so that for a scant second, Silvermane reminded Peter of himself before he was Spider-Man. But there was a difference, a predatory gleam in his eyes that banished the thought of any similarity. Peter wasn't a bully, and Silvermane wasn't a kid.
Where's the Connors family?
There was no response. Despite his open eyes, Silvio Manfredi seemed unconscious. Cradling his ribs, Spider-Man headed into a surprisingly empty hallway.
For that matter, where's the rest of the Magia?
The first few rooms he checked were vacant. In one, he found a landline and used it to place an anonymous call to the police.
Police dispatch, state the nature of your emergency. Hello? Hello?
Spider-Man went bolting up the stairs and into a wide open area that looked like a set from Scarface, complete with gaudy chandelier. At the far end, Magia's soldiers jostled for position, aiming down a corridor.
The next one won't be a warning shot, Connors! No one's getting into that room until we hear from Silvermane. You've got to the count of 3 to get back here. 1, 2...
A gooey bit of web slapped the man's mouth closed. Another web snatched his gun. The others, 10 in all, whirled to see Spider-Man suspended from the chandelier. Despite his aches, he was pretty sure he could take them, but not easily. And in the struggle, a stray bullet could strike Dr. Connors. If he was still Dr. Connors.
Listen up! You gave the doc a chance, so let me return the favor. Your creepy boss is upstairs sleeping like, well, let's just say he's out cold. And I'm not sure if he's going to jail or reform school, but the police are on their way and the exit's behind me. Run for it, and maybe I'll be too focused on freeing your captives to pay too much attention. Start shooting and, well, how many of you want a new attempted murder charge added to your rap sheet?
2 raised their weapons to fire. But when his web snagged them before they could squeeze off a shot, the rest raced for the door. Spider-Man was headed for the corridor when he spotted Caesar Cicero crawling out from behind the enormous desk, trying to join the stampede. Peter used a web to snag his ankle, and Cicero's leg flew out from under him.
Sorry, this offer does not apply to management.
Let me go. I gotta get out of here. I'll make it worth your while.
Nah, I don't see what could be worth more than watching you squirm, given all the lives you helped the Magia ruin.
He left Cicero and kept moving. In a room at the corridor's end, he found them. Dr. Connors was sitting on the floor, his single arm wrapped around Martha and Billy. All 4 of theirs were wrapped around him.
Doc, are you okay? I got things, under control.
Connors looked up, nodded briefly, and then went back to hugging his family. Feeling a bit as if he were intruding on the reunion, Spider-Man took a few steps back.
So that'll be the police. You should be fine until they get up here, but if you like, I can hang around.
Was that Silvermane? Spider-Man sprinted back through the office. Cicero was gone. One polished shoe and silk sock still held fast by the web. Spidey figured he'd run off with the others until he found the Magia attorney in the lower hallway. He was limping toward the lab, wincing at the cold floor against his bare foot.
Senile idiota! You and that rock have destroyed us! If that elixir hadn't killed you, I'd put a bullet...
His threat was cut short when what appeared to be Silvio Manfredi's suit, crumpled into a disheveled mass, flew out of the lab. And knocked an astonished Cicero out of the way. The bundle threw itself into the nearest empty room. Dumbfounded, Cicero leaned into the wall and slid to the ground. Spider-Man webbed up the man's ankles and shoulders.
Is there any other way out of there?
Nuh-uh.
Spider-Man grabbed the knob and twisted.
Stay back! I'll kill you! I'll tear out your heart with my freaking fingernails!
City lights stretched in from the windows, but not far enough to illuminate every shadow. From the darkest corner of the room, Silvermane's clothes lay in a bundle, quivering. As Spider-Man cautiously approached, a baby's pink, oversized head peeked out from the folds of the finely tailored suit. As Peter watched, Silvermane shrank, growing smaller and smaller, newer and newer. But with every step back along life's path, his eyes retained that terrible gleam.
It's like part of him refuses to change, no matter how old or young he gets.
It might have been a trick of the scant light skimming a diamond cufflink, but even when Silvio Manfredi finally disappeared, the gleam remained. So, in a way, he got what he wanted. The furnishings in the Long Island Beach Manor were adequate, the ocean view breathtaking. The open floor plan gave even a large man plenty of room to pace. But it wasn't home. Without Hell's Kitchen to remind Wilson Fisk how far he'd risen, he felt like a king in exile. Until today. He was never hopeless, but for the first time since they'd gone into hiding, the news was good. So good that despite their strained relations, he was eager to share it with Vanessa. She stood in the center of a long row of windows, looking dully at the water. He strode back and forth behind her, occasionally clenching his fists in triumph.
Some details are missing, others subject to rumor. But the most important facts are crystal clear. Silvermane is gone, presumed dead. The Magia's lauded attorney is awaiting trial. Our enemies have defeated themselves. Perhaps I should locate Wesley. No doubt he already has ideas on who the traitor is.
Hoping that she'd respond, he paused. She had the sliding glass door open a crack. The salt-tinged breeze swept her gown. She looked regal, as always. A queen. His queen. But a sad and mourning queen.
Do you understand, my love? We can go home. I know I've been difficult, fighting phantoms, dreaming of being trapped in jail while you were in danger. You saw how I thrashed in my sleep. You know how strong I am. I only asked you to stay in a separate bed for your protection. But that's over now.
She pulled the door open farther. The distant winter was already in the air.
It's not that, Wilson. It's never been that.
You rescued me from the street. You refused to abandon me completely, but your heart remains out of reach. Are we to stay in this purgatory then? Together but apart? I knew how hard you'd take Richard's death. I realize now that my fruitless lies only deepened that pain. But so long as you refuse to speak of it, to show it to me, that depth remains unfathomable.
He reached out, daring to touch her shoulder. She trembled so fiercely that he expected her to be in tears when she turned.
Vanessa, are you all right? Should I get you one of your pills?
She pushed his hand away.
Tell me what you're feeling. I prefer that you raged at me, beat me. Whatever it is, let it out. If not to free us both, then at least to free yourself.
I still love you too much to do that, but I am not going to protect you from the truth anymore either.
The truth? What truth?
Ever alert to threats, his eyes caught an odd movement on the beach. The sand on what appeared to be a dune shivered as if hit by a strong wind. As the vibrations continued, an ebon vehicle shed its camouflage. A hooded man stepped out.
Who is that? How did he get past our security?
I invited him. It was time you heard him out.
Fisk's gaze shot between his wife's face and the approaching figure.
Invited him? Invited who? Is that the traitor? The schemer? Vanessa, have you betrayed me? Waited all this time to drive the knife into my heart yourself? All you had to do was ask. I would have died for you willingly.
She caressed his cheek, as she always did when trying to calm him.
No, no. No matter what you've done, my love, I could not betray you. You have betrayed yourself.
What are you saying? What do you mean?
The figure reached the porch. In seconds, he'd be at the door. Vanessa tried to keep herself between them. But Fisk thrust her aside.
I will not let him in our home!
Heedless of the doorframe's narrow width, he charged at the intruder on the other side. The Kingpin raised his voice to make certain he was heard over the roar of the surf.
You and I have accounts to settle.
We do.
The schemer folded in on himself, his hood covering even more of his face.
Wilson, stop, please!
Your muscle is the sort achieved in a gym, but you're clearly no fighter. A second blow is all it will take to kill you. But I don't intend to let your secrets die with you.
Fisk slapped the schemer with the back of his hand, letting his ring scratch the skin along the man's cheek.
How did you learn so much about me?
I'll tell you.
Why did you challenge my leadership?
I'll tell you.
What is there between you and my wife?
Wilson, hear him out!
I'll tell you everything, and then you can kill me if you like.
Fisk pushed the schemer toward the glass wall, standing close enough to ensure he couldn't run.
Make it fast.
The hooded figure kept his head down.
Some sons might fear living in the shadow of a powerful father, but I only wanted to be more like him until I learned how bloody his shadow was. I was so disgusted, so ashamed, I planned to throw myself off the highest cliff I could find, but I lived through my suicide attempt. I even lived through an avalanche.
An avalanche? Do you think I'm a fool? You read about Richard in my stolen files!
No. If you were only a fool, I wouldn't still wish I were dead. As it was, the only way to live with myself was to try to turn my shame into a fury like your own. I dedicated myself to one goal: destroying what had once comforted me, your damned bloody shadow. Your arrogance made that easy. The only surprise was how hard it was for my own mother to recognize me. How hard it still is for you to recognize your son.
Liar. You're just some Magia lackey, not fit to mention my son's name.
Before Fisk could strike him again,
No!
Vanessa knelt by him, caressing their enemy's torn cheek, the same way she'd caressed her husband moments ago. After casting a warning glance at Wilson Fisk, she lowered the schemer's hood. The face was bruised, twisted into a whimpering rage, the ginger hair freckled with sand, but the sun clearly showed the features of Richard Fisk.
It is him, Wilson. He approached me days ago. I had it confirmed. So I suppose now we've committed the same sin against each other. You couldn't bear to tell me he was dead. I couldn't bear to tell you he was alive.
Staring at his son, Fisk fell back into a patio chair.
You hate me.
No. I love you, even though I wish with every fiber of my being that you were not my father.
You hate me.
The horrid sensation from his nightmares consumed him. But this time, distant though